When my husband died, I kept the $500 million inheritance secret, just to see who'd treat me right. They threw my suitcases into the rain the night of my husband's funeral and told me I had 1 hour to disappear. What they didn't know is that I just inherited everything they thought was theirs. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request.
Please subscribe.
Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this story touched you. My name is Mirabelle, but they call me Mira, and here's my story. You know that moment when you realize you've been living someone else's version of your life? It hit me in a lawyer's office 3 days after I buried my husband. Not during the funeral, where his sister Octavia wore sunglasses indoors and didn't shed a single tear. Not when his business partner Jonah gripped my shoulder and whispered, "We'll take care of you," like I was a child who'd lost her way. No, it hit me when the attorney slid a sealed envelope across the mahogany desk and said, "Mrs. Laverne, your husband left very specific instructions. You are not to open this until you are alone." I remember the weight of it in my hands. Cream linen paper. Dmitri's handwriting on the front. For Mirabelle. When the wolves come. I didn't understand. Not yet. My name is Mirabelle Sokol, though for 3 years I was Mirabelle Laverne. And this is the story of how I became a ghost in my own life, so I could finally see who was real. Let me rewind. 18 months ago, I was a 32-year-old art conservator working at a small museum in the city, living in a modest apartment I could barely afford, and madly in love with a man who made me believe the world was softer than it really was. Dmitri Laverne wasn't like the men you read about in magazines. He didn't throw money around or wear his wealth like armor. He wore flannel on Sundays. He read poetry in Russian to me while I fell asleep. He funded literacy programs and soup kitchens and never put his name on anything. I thought I married a man. What I didn't realize was that I'd married into a family of lions who were just waiting for him to die so they could feast. Dmitri had a heart condition. We knew. He told me on our second date, actually sat me down at a cafe by the water and said, "I need you to know that my time might be shorter than most. And if you can't live with that, I'll understand." I took his hand. I said, "Then we'll make the time we have count." We had 3 years. 3 years of early morning coffee on the balcony. 3 years of donating anonymously to causes we believed in. 3 years of quiet, radical love. He never flaunted his family's fortune. In fact, he kept me away from most of it. I met his sister Octavia twice. His mother had passed years before. His father was distant, cold. Dmitri said he built a life separate from theirs for a reason. "They don't know how to love, Mira," he told me once. "They only know how to own." I thought he was being dramatic. I was wrong. The night Dmitri collapsed, we were dancing in the kitchen. Etta James on the speaker, his arms around my waist. He looked at me and said, "You know I'd give all of it up if it meant 1 more year with you." Then his knees buckled. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. And with him went every illusion I had about who cared for me. Meanwhile, 200 miles north in Havermill Cove, a man named Callum was sanding down the legs of a 19th century oak table in his workshop by the docks. He didn't know my name yet, didn't know I existed. But in 6 weeks, he'd be the only reason I'd remember what it felt like to be seen. Callum was 38, broad-shouldered in the way men who work with their hands often are, with sawdust perpetually caught in his dark hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile somewhere along the way. He ran a small restoration business out of a converted boathouse, fixing broken furniture that people thought was beyond saving. It was fitting, really. He'd spent the last 4 years trying to fix himself. His wife, Anna, had died in a car accident when their daughter was only 2. Now, at 6 years old, his little girl, Lucy, was the only thing tethering him to the world. He worked. He parented. He existed. But he didn't live. Not really. On the day I arrived in Havamil Cove, Callum was thinking about whether he'd made a mistake staying in this town. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that let your ghost speak too loud. He wiped the sweat from his brow, set down the sandpaper, and looked out at the water. Fog rolled in thick, the way it always did in October. The lighthouse blinked in the distance. He didn't know that I was sitting in a cab 2 miles away, staring at the same lighthouse, wondering if running away from your life counted as strength or cowardice. I had 2 suitcases, a prepaid phone, and an envelope full of documents that said I was worth $500 million. But I'd told no one. Not Octavia, who'd called me twice since the funeral to ask if I needed help managing Dmitri's affairs. Not Jonah, who'd sent flowers with a card that read, "Let's talk soon about your future." Not even Renata, my best friend since college, who'd hugged me at the funeral and said, "You'll stay with me, right? You can't be alone." I'd smiled, nodded, and then I disappeared, because Dmitri had written me a letter. And in it he said, "Mira, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. But I need you to do something for me. Don't tell anyone about the money. Not for 6 months. Not until you see who stays when they think there's nothing left to gain. I've seen what my family does to people. I won't let them do it to you. You'll have everything you need. But please, give yourself time to breathe. Time to see clearly. And if you find someone who loves you when you have nothing, hold on to them. That's the only wealth that matters."
So I ran.
I came to this little coastal town where no one knew my last name, where I rented a 1-room cottage for $800 a month, where I started waitressing at a diner called Pearls. And I waited. I waited to see who would call, who would check in, who would love me when they thought I was broken. Most people failed that test. But Callum Reed? He didn't even know he was taking it. Have you ever had to distance yourself from people just to see who would actually come looking for you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. The first time I saw Callum Reed, I was crying in the alley behind Pearl's Diner. Not the elegant kind of crying you see in movies, the kind where a single tear rolls down a porcelain cheek and somehow makes you look more beautiful. No, this was the ugly kind. The kind where snot runs into your mouth and your chest heaves, and you sound like a wounded animal. It was my 4th day in Havamil Cove. My 4th day of waking up in a cottage that smelled like mildew and salt water. My 4th day of pretending I was fine. Pearl Mahoney had hired me on the spot when I walked in looking for work. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair braided down her back and eyes that saw straight through you. She didn't ask why someone my age was applying for minimum wage work. She just handed me an apron and said, "You run from something or to something, honey?" "Both," I'd whispered. She nodded.
"Good.
Running's only bad if you never stop." The work was harder than I expected. I hadn't waitressed since college, and my body wasn't used to standing for 8 hours, balancing trays, smiling at strangers who didn't tip. But I needed it. Needed the exhaustion. Needed something to do besides sit in that cottage and feel the weight of Dmitri's absence crushing my chest. But that day, day 4, I'd made a mistake. I'd answered my phone. It was Octavia. "Mirabelle," she'd said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Where are you? We've been worried sick. Jonah says you're not returning his calls. The estate lawyers need your signature on some documents." I'd stepped into the alley, hand shaking. I need some time, Octavia." "Time?" Her voice sharpened. "Dmitri's been gone 2 weeks, Mirabelle. We need to settle his affairs. There are properties, accounts, business matters." "He left a will," I said quietly. Silence. Then, "Yes. And as his family, we need to make sure everything is handled properly. You understand, don't you? You were only married 3 years. There are complexities you wouldn't understand." My throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" She exhaled, like she was preparing to explain something to a child. Dmitri loved you, I'm sure. But his assets, those belong to the family. They always have. We'll make sure you're taken care of course. A settlement. Something reasonable. Something reasonable. Like I was a contractor they were paying off. I have to go, I whispered. Mirabelle. I hung up, and then I collapsed against the brick wall and sobbed. Because in that moment, I understood what Dmitri had been trying to tell me. They don't know how to love. They only know how to own. I wasn't a person to them. I was an obstacle. That's when I heard the footsteps. I looked up, vision blurred with tears, and saw a man standing at the mouth of the alley.
Tall. Broad.
Wearing a faded gray shirt covered in sawdust. He had a toolbox in one hand and an expression I couldn't quite read, something between concern and the deep exhaustion of someone who recognized pain when he saw it. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he cleared his throat. You okay? I wiped my face with the back of my hand, humiliated. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Well, I am. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. He turned to leave. And I don't know why. Maybe it was the gentleness in his voice, or the fact that he didn't push, didn't pry, didn't demand anything from me. But I heard myself say, wait.
He stopped.
I stood up, legs shaking. I'm sorry. That was rude. Bad phone call. He turned back, and for the first time, I really looked at him. He had dark eyes. The kind that looked like they'd seen too much. A scar through his left eyebrow. Hands that were calloused and strong. He wasn't handsome in a polished way. He was handsome in the way a mountain is handsome. Steady. Unmovable.
Real.
Those'll mess you up, he said quietly. What? Bad phone calls. He set the toolbox down. I've had a few of those. Something about the way he said it made me believe him. I wrapped my arms around myself. Do they ever stop? The calls? The feeling like you're drowning. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, yeah, they do. Takes longer than you'd like, but they do. I nodded, blinking back fresh tears. He picked up his toolbox again. Pearl asked me to fix the freezer door. You work here? Started this week. Huh. He almost smiled.
Well.
Welcome to Havermill Cove. It's quiet, but the people are decent. Mostly. There's a guy named Ron who runs the bait shop. Talks too much.
But otherwise, yeah.
Decent. I surprised myself by laughing. It was a small, broken sound, but it was real. He noticed. And something softened in his face. I'm Callum, he said. Mira, I replied. Not Mirabelle Laverne. Not Mrs. Laverne. Just Mira. It felt like the first true thing I'd said in weeks. Nice to meet you, Mira. He nodded once, then walked past me toward the diner's back door. But before he went inside, he paused and looked back. For what it's worth, he said, whoever's on the other end of that phone. If they're making you cry like that, they don't deserve your time. And then he disappeared inside. I stood there in the alley, wind pulling at my hair, the smell of salt and frying oil mixing in the air. And for the first time since Dmitri died, I felt something other than grief. I felt seen, not as a widow, not as an inheritance, just as a woman standing in an alley, breaking apart. And someone had stopped, not to fix me, not to take anything from me, just to acknowledge that I was there.
It was such a small thing.
But in that moment, it was everything. I didn't know it yet, but that 30-second interaction would change my entire life. Because Callum Reed had just done something no one else had done since Dmitri died. He'd treated me like I mattered. Not because of who I'd been married to. Not because of what I could give him. But because I was a person in pain.
And he knew what that felt like.
I told myself it didn't mean anything. The interaction in the alley. The way Callum's voice had been gentle without being patronizing. The fact that he hadn't asked questions or tried to fix me or looked at me like I was fragile. It was just a moment of human decency, I reasoned. Nothing more. But over the next 2 weeks, I found myself looking for him. Not obviously. Not in a way anyone would notice. But when I wiped down tables near the front window, my eyes would drift toward the docks where his workshop sat like a weathered barnacle clinging to the pier. When I took my break, I'd stand outside and watch the fog roll in, and sometimes, just sometimes, I'd see him walking toward Pearl's with that same toolbox, that same quiet presence. He came in for lunch every Thursday. Always ordered the same thing. Black coffee, turkey sandwich on wheat, no mayo. Always sat at the counter. Always nodded at me when I refilled his cup. Thanks, Mira.
Just that.
Nothing more. But the way he said my name, like it was worth remembering, made something in my chest ache. I hated it, because I wasn't supposed to feel anything.
I was supposed to be testing people.
Watching. Waiting to see who reached out, who cared, who proved themselves worthy of trust. I wasn't supposed to notice the way a stranger's hands moved when he wrapped them around a coffee mug. Wasn't supposed to wonder what his story was. Wasn't supposed to care. Dmitri had been gone 5 weeks. 5 weeks, and I was already betraying his memory by noticing another man. The guilt was suffocating. On a gray afternoon in late October, Pearl found me staring out the kitchen window, dish towel frozen in my hands. "You're gonna rub the pattern right off that plate, honey," she said. I blinked, looked down. I'd been scrubbing the same dish for who knows how long. "Sorry," I muttered, setting it down. Pearl leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She had that look, the one that said she saw more than you wanted her to. "You grieving or you hiding?" I stiffened. "What?" "I've worked this diner 40 years, Mira. I know the difference." She tilted her head. "Grieving folks cry a lot, but they talk. Hiding folks go quiet. You've been quiet." My throat tightened. "I'm fine." "Uh-huh." She didn't look convinced. "And I'm 25. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Pearl poured herself a coffee. "You don't gotta tell me your story. But whatever you ran from, it's still chasing you. I can see it in the way you jump every time that phone buzzes." She wasn't wrong. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Octavia, Jonah, even Renata, my supposed best friend, who'd sent increasingly frantic messages. "Mira, where are you? People are asking about you. You can't just disappear like this. It's not healthy."
Healthy.
As if staying in the city surrounded by people who saw me as a problem to manage would have been better. I hadn't responded to any of them, and the silence was telling. Not one of them had said, "I'm worried about you." Not one had said, "How can I help?" It was all logistics, all about managing the situation, managing me. Pearl set her mug down. "You know what I think." "What?" "I think you're punishing yourself for something that ain't your fault." I looked away. "You don't know what I know you're young. I know you lost somebody. And I know you look at Callum Reed like you're scared of what you feel." My breath caught. "I don't, honey." Pearl's voice softened. "I've seen a lot of hearts come through this diner. Some broken, some healing. Yours is both. And that's okay. But don't go thinking you're betraying someone by being alive." Tears stung my eyes. "It's only been 5 weeks," I whispered. "And you think there's a timer on grief?" Pearl shook her head. "There's no right way to do this, Mira. You feel what you feel when you feel it. And if a good man makes you remember what it's like to be seen, that ain't betrayal. That's survival." I wanted to believe her. But that night, lying in my cottage with the sound of waves crashing outside, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos of Dmitri. His smile. His eyes. The way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. How could I even think about someone else? How could I let myself feel something, anything, when the man I loved was barely cold in the ground? My finger hovered over Octavia's contact. Maybe I should just tell them. Tell them about the money. The inheritance. End this charade. Go back to the city. Let the lawyers handle everything. Stop hiding. But then I remembered her voice on the phone. You were only married 3 years. Like my grief had an expiration date. Like my love for Dmitri could be quantified and dismissed. I locked my phone and threw it across the room. The next day, Callum came in for lunch. I poured his coffee, hands shaking slightly. Thanks, he said. I nodded, started to turn away. Mira. I froze. He was looking at me with those steady, dark eyes. Not prying, just noticing. You doing okay? It was such a simple question, but the weight of it nearly broke me. I'm fine, I lied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. He didn't push, didn't demand, just accepted my answer and went back to his sandwich. And somehow, that made it worse. Because Callum Reed was showing me more respect, more basic human kindness than anyone from my old life had. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to let myself be cared for by someone who wanted nothing from me. So I did what I'd been doing since Dmitri died. I pulled away. I kept my distance. I told myself it was safer that way. But late that night, staring at the ceiling of my cottage, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd said my name. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Havermill Cove, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was running from the wrong thing. Maybe the real test wasn't about who had come looking for me. Maybe it was about whether I'd let myself be found. The storm hit Havermill Cove on a Wednesday night in early November. Not the kind of storm that announces itself with distant thunder and gradually darkening skies. This one rolled in fast and furious, like the ocean had finally gotten tired of being gentle. Wind howled through the streets, rattling windows and tearing shingles off roofs. Rain came down in sheets, so thick you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. I was closing up pearls when the power went out. One moment I was wiping down the last table, the next I was standing in complete darkness, the only sound the howling wind and my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Mira? Pearl's voice called from the kitchen. You still out there? Yeah, I called back, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. She emerged with a camping lantern, her face ghostly in the yellow glow. Roads are gonna flood. You can't drive back to your cottage in this. I'll be fine.
No. Her voice was firm.
You'll stay here tonight. I've got a cot in the back office. It ain't the Ritz, but it's dry. Before I could argue, the front door burst open. Wind and rain exploded into the diner, and with it came Callum, soaked to the bone, carrying a toolbox and what looked like emergency supplies. Pearl, he said, pushing the door closed against the wind. Your roof's got a leak over the storage room. I've got tarps in the truck, but I need to.
He stopped when he saw me.
Water dripped from his hair, his shirt plastered to his chest. For a moment, we just stared at each other in the dim lantern light. Mira, he said, surprised. You're still here? She was about to do something stupid and try to drive home, Pearl said. You got room at your place? Lucy's with her grandma tonight, right? My eyes widened. No, I can stay here. I don't need. The storage room's flooding, Pearl interrupted. And that cot's gonna be soaked in about 10 minutes. Callum's got a generator and a guest room. Makes more sense. Pearl, Callum started. I'm not asking, I'm telling. She looked between us. Storm's supposed to last all night. Power company says we won't have electricity till morning at the earliest. You two go. I'll handle things here. I can help, I protested. You can help by not making me worry about you drowning on Route 9. Pearl pushed the lantern into my hands.
Go.
Both of you. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in Callum's truck, hands clasped in my lap, trying not to think about how small the space felt with him beside me. The windshield wipers worked frantically, but uselessly against the downpour. Callum drove slowly, carefully, his jaw tight with concentration. I'm sorry about this, he said finally. Pearl's persistent. You don't have to apologize. I can find somewhere else. In this? He glanced at me briefly.
No.
It's fine. I've got space. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the storm's rage. Your daughter, I said, searching for something to say. Lucy? Pearl mentioned. She's 6. Stays with her grandmother every Wednesday. His voice was carefully neutral. Has since. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. I heard the grief in that pause. Recognized it. It sounded like my own. I'm sorry, I said softly. For what? Whatever put that sound in your voice. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, my wife died 4 years ago. Car accident. Lucy was too. My chest constricted. Callum. It's okay. But his voice said it wasn't. Not really. It's been long enough that people expect me to be over it. But you don't really get over it, do you? You just learn to carry it differently. I looked out the window at the rain, my own reflection ghostly in the glass. No, I whispered. You don't. His house was a small craftsman bungalow set back from the main road, surrounded by tall pines that swayed violently in the wind. Inside, it was warm and lived in. Toys scattered near the couch, drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, the faint smell of sawdust and coffee. Callum grabbed towels from a closet and handed me one. Bathroom's down the hall, if you want to dry off. I'll get the generator running. Thank you, I said. Really? I know this is. It's fine, Mira. He met my eyes. Really? He disappeared into what looked like a basement door, and I stood there dripping on his floor, feeling like an intruder in his life, but also feeling something else. Safe. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. An hour later, we sat at his kitchen table with mugs of tea, the generator humming in the background. The storm raged outside, but inside it was quiet, almost peaceful. Can I ask you something?
Callum said.
I tensed. Okay. Why Havermill Cove? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I needed somewhere no one knew me. Running from something? I thought about Octavia's cold voice, Jonah's calculating eyes, Renata's texts that asked about me but felt like they were really asking about something else. Testing something, I said quietly. He waited. I don't know why I kept talking. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was because Callum had shared his grief with me, and it felt like a door had opened. My husband died 2 months ago, I heard myself say. And the people I thought would be there for me weren't. So I left. I wanted to see who would care when they thought I had nothing. Callum was quiet, processing. And he asked gently. I laughed, but it was hollow. Turns out most people only loved me for what I represented, not for who I am. Their loss, he said simply. I looked up, surprised. He was watching me with those steady dark eyes, and there was no pity in them. No judgment. Just understanding. Anyone who can't see your worth without a price tag is an idiot, he said. My throat tightened. You don't even know me, I whispered. I know you work hard. I know you're kind to Pearl even when you're clearly carrying something heavy. I know you cry in alleys and still show up the next day. He shrugged. That tells me everything I need to know. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Hey, Callum said softly. You okay? I nodded, wiping my face.
Yeah.
I forgot what it felt like. To be seen. Well, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. I see you, Mira. And God help me, I believed him. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, something was shifting. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but couldn't seem to stop. I woke up on Callum's couch to the smell of coffee and pancakes. For a disorienting moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The storm, Pearl's insistence, the drive through torrential rain, sitting at Callum's kitchen table and telling him more than I'd told anyone in months. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. Through the window, I could see pale morning light breaking through dissipating clouds. The storm had passed. "Morning," Callum said from the kitchen doorway. He was already dressed, hair damp from a shower. "Hope you're hungry. I made too much." "You didn't have to." "I know." He smiled slightly. "But Lucy always says pancakes make everything better." Figured it was worth a shot. Something about the way he said it, so casual, so genuine, made my chest ache. At his kitchen table, over breakfast neither of us had planned, the walls started coming down. "Can I ask you something?" I said, pushing a piece of pancake around my plate.
"Sure."
"Yesterday, you said your wife died 4 years ago. Do people really expect you to be over it?" Callum set down his fork, leaning back in his chair. "Her parents do. Well-meaning friends do. Even Lucy's teacher once asked me if I was seeing anyone yet like Anna was a job I'd quit." He exhaled slowly. "People are uncomfortable with grief. They want you to move through it on their timeline, not yours." "Yes," I breathed. "Exactly." He looked at me. "Your husband's family?" I nodded. "His sister called me 2 weeks after the funeral. Wanted to talk about settling his affairs. Like he was a business transaction that needed closing." "Christ," Callum muttered. "She said I'd only been married to him for 3 years. Like that put an expiration date on my grief. Like I didn't have the right to." My voice broke. Callum reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. Not touching. Just there. "You have every right," he said quietly. "Duration doesn't determine depth." I looked at his hand, calloused, strong, respectful of my space, and felt something crack open inside me. "Dmitri knew," I whispered. "Knew what?" "That they'd do this."
"His family."
"That's why he—" I stopped, realizing I was about to reveal too much. But Callum didn't push. He just waited. And maybe it was that patience that broke me. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying secrets alone. "He left me everything," I said, so quietly I almost didn't hear myself. "In his will. Everything. And he told me not to tell anyone." He said. I swallowed hard. He said to wait and see who would treat me right when they thought I had nothing. Callum's expression didn't change. No shock. No sudden calculation. Just steady attention. "Smart man," he said finally. I laughed, surprising myself. "That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Most people would have questions. Would want to know how much, or—" "I don't care how much." He met my eyes. "That's your business, not mine. What I care about is that you're here, alone, testing people who should have loved you without conditions. That's—" He shook his head. "That's heartbreaking, Mira." Tears blurred my vision. "I have $500 million, I said, the words tumbling out like a confession. "And I've never felt more worthless. Because every single person who's called me, who's texted, who's checked in, they're not asking how I am. They're managing me, positioning themselves, waiting for their piece." "Not everyone," Callum said softly. "No. Pearl didn't ask you for anything."
He was right.
"And I'm not asking either," he continued. "I don't care if you have $500 million or 50 cents. That doesn't change who you are." "You don't even know who I am," I whispered. "I know you're brave enough to walk away from everything to find out who's real. I know you're kind even when you're breaking. I know you loved your husband enough to honor his last wish, even though it's killing you." He leaned forward. "That's who you are, Mira.
Not a bank account.
Not a last name.
You."
I covered my face with my hands and wept. Not the quiet, controlled tears I'd been rationing out for weeks. Full, body-shaking sobs. And Callum didn't try to stop me. Didn't tell me it was okay or that I'd feel better soon. He just sat there, present, letting me fall apart in his kitchen on a Thursday morning. When I finally quieted, he handed me a napkin. "Sorry," I croaked. "Don't be." I wiped my face, embarrassed. "I don't usually, Mira." His voice was gentle but firm. You're allowed to break. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to grieve your husband and grieve the people who failed you at the same time. How are you so good at this? I asked, my voice raw. His smile was sad. Practice. Lots of therapy. And a daughter who asks me every night if I'm sad about mommy. What do you tell her? The truth. That I am. That I probably always will be, a little. But that being sad doesn't mean I can't also be happy. That hearts are big enough to hold both. I stared at him. You're raising a very wise 6-year-old. She's raising a very slow-learning 38-year-old. He stood collecting our plates. You want more coffee, Callum? He turned. Thank you, I said. For last night. For this morning. For not treating me like I'm broken. You're not broken, he said simply. You're grieving. There's a difference. After breakfast, Callum drove me back to my cottage. The roads were clear, the sun was out, and everything looked washed clean. But inside, I was a mess of confusion. Because something had shifted last night. Something had opened. And I didn't know if I was ready for what that meant. As I stood on my porch, watching his truck disappear down the road, my phone buzzed. Multiple missed calls. Multiple voicemails. All from Octavia. I listened to the most recent one. Mirabelle, this is getting ridiculous. We've been patient, but we need to discuss the estate. Dmitri's assets are frozen until we can locate you and finalize certain arrangements. Call me back. Today. Her voice was ice. But underneath it, I heard something else. Desperation. They needed me to sign something. Needed me to cooperate. Which meant they didn't know. Didn't know that Dmitri had outmaneuvered them. Didn't know that I held all the cards. I deleted the voicemail. And for the first time since Dmitri died, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood what he'd given me. Not just money. Freedom. Freedom to discover who I was without him. Freedom to see who would love me when I wasn't useful. Freedom to choose what came next. And standing there on my porch, thinking about Callum's steady eyes and the way he'd said, I see you, Mira, I realized something terrifying. I was starting to want something I hadn't planned for. Something that had nothing to do with money or tests or proving points. I was starting to want someone who saw me. Really saw me. And that scared me more than anything Octavia could say. Have you ever met someone at the worst possible time? When you weren't ready, when you were still healing but they made you want to try anyway? Tell me about it in the comments. Sometimes the right person shows up when we're still putting ourselves back together. Lucy Reed was the most direct 6-year-old I'd ever met. Are you my dad's girlfriend? She asked me the following Sunday, standing in Pearl's diner with her hands on her hips and her father frozen in mortification behind her. I was refilling the napkin dispensers. I nearly dropped the entire stack. Lucy, Callum started, his face turning red. What? She looked up at him, innocently. Grandma said you've been smiling more. And you only smile when something makes you happy. So I thought maybe Mira makes you happy. My heart did something complicated in my chest. Callum looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. We've talked about this. You can't just ask people. It's okay, I said, crouching down to Lucy's level. She had her father's dark eyes and a spray of freckles across her nose. I'm not your dad's girlfriend. I'm his friend. Is that okay? Lucy studied me seriously. Do you like pancakes? Yes. Good. Daddy makes the best pancakes. He made some for you, didn't he? After the storm? He did, I said, smiling despite myself. They were really good. See. Lucy turned triumphantly to her father. She likes your pancakes. That's important. Callum covered his face with his hand. I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said, standing. She's wonderful. And I meant it. After that, things shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. Callum started coming into Pearl's more often. Not just Thursdays. Sometimes he'd bring Lucy after school, and she'd sit at the counter doing homework while he nursed a coffee and pretended he wasn't watching me work. I pretended I didn't notice him watching. But I did. God, I did. One afternoon, Pearl was in rare form, regaling Lucy with stories about the town's history while I cleaned tables. Callum appeared at my elbow, dish towel in hand. "You don't have to help," I said. "I know." He started wiping down the table I'd just cleared. "But Lucy's occupied, and I've got hands." We worked in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he said, "She really likes you, you know." "Lucy?" "Yeah." He glanced at his daughter, who was giggling at something Pearl said. "She doesn't warm up to people easily. Not since Anna." I set down my spray bottle. "She must miss her. Every day." His voice was soft. "But she was so young when it happened. Sometimes I worry she's forgetting. And sometimes I worry she's remembering. I don't know which is worse." "Both," I said quietly. "It's both." He looked at me, and in that look was a recognition so deep it made my breath catch. We understood each other. We were both carrying ghosts, both trying to figure out how to honor the dead while still living. "Mira," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Can I ask you something?" "Okay." "Why are you still here?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "In Havermill Cove. You said you came here to test people, to see who'd treat you right. But it's been almost 2 months. You've got your answer. So why stay?" My throat tightened. Because of you, I thought. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I don't know," I said instead. "Maybe I'm not ready to go back yet. Or maybe," he said carefully, "you're exactly where you need to be." Our eyes held. And in that moment I felt it, the pull. The dangerous, terrifying, beautiful pull towards something I hadn't asked for but couldn't seem to resist. "Daddy," Lucy called. "Pearl says there's a festival next weekend. Can we go? Can Mira come too?" Callum broke eye contact first, turning toward his daughter. "We'll see, sweetheart. That means yes." Lucy beamed at me. "You'll come, right?" I looked at Callum, who was carefully not looking at me. "Sure," I heard myself say. "I'd love to." The Havermill Cove Harvest Festival was the kind of small-town event that felt like stepping into a Hallmark movie. String lights, craft booths, the smell of apple cider and fried dough, live music from a local band that was enthusiastic if not entirely on key. Lucy dragged us from booth to booth, her small hand gripping mine with an ease that simultaneously warmed and shattered my heart. Dmitri and I had talked about having children. We'd been trying actually in those last few months, but his heart condition made everything complicated, and we decided to wait. Now we'd never have that chance. And here I was, holding another man's daughter's hand, feeling things I had no right to feel. "You okay?" Callum asked quietly as Lucy ran ahead to a booth selling handmade jewelry. "Yeah," I lied. "Mira." I looked at him. "It's okay to be sad and happy at the same time," he said. "I told you. Hearts are big enough." "I don't know if mine is," I whispered. "It is." He said it with such certainty. Trust me. I spent 2 years thinking mine wasn't. Thinking if I let myself feel anything good, I was betraying Anna. But that's not how it works. Love doesn't diminish love. It just grows. "How do you know?" He smiled, watching Lucy hold up a beaded bracelet to the light. "Because I feel guilty every time I smile at you. And then I remember that Anna would be furious with me for wasting time on guilt instead of living. She'd probably like you, actually. You're stubborn like she was." I laughed, surprised. "Is that a compliment?" "The highest." He paused. "She'd also tell me to stop being an idiot and just say what I'm thinking." My heart hammered. "Which is?" "That I like having you around. That Lucy lights up when you're here. That I haven't felt this, settled in 4 years." He looked at me. "And that scares the hell out of me." "Callum." I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you're still grieving. I know you've got complicated stuff to figure out. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone in feeling whatever you're feeling. If you're feeling it. I was feeling it. God, I was feeling it so much it terrified me.
Daddy.
Mira, Lucy ran back, holding up the bracelet. Look, it has little stars. It's beautiful, I managed. Can I get it? Callum pulled out his wallet, but I'd already handed the vendor a 20. Mira. My treat, I said firmly. Lucy threw her arms around my waist. Thank you. And standing there in the middle of the festival, lights twinkling overhead, music playing, a little girl's arms around me, and her father looking at me like I was something precious. I realized I'd failed Dmitri's test. Not because people had shown me their worst, but because someone had shown me it was possible to feel again. And I didn't know if that was betrayal or blessing. That night, walking back to my cottage alone, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello. Mrs. Laverne. The voice was smooth, professional. This is Richard Chen, senior partner at Chen and Associates. I represent your late husband's estate. My stomach dropped. Yes. We need to schedule a meeting. There are documents that require your signature. Time-sensitive matters. Would you be available this week? I looked back toward the lights of the festival fading in the distance. Toward the life I'd been building here. Toward the man and little girl who'd made me feel human again. Mrs. Laverne? Yes, I said quietly. I'll be there. Because the test was over, and it was time to face what came next. The law office of Chen and Associates occupied the 43rd floor of a glass tower in the city I'd fled 2 months ago. I stood in the lobby wearing a dress I'd bought from a thrift store in Havermill Cove, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and felt like an imposter in my own life. The receptionist looked at me with barely concealed confusion. Mrs. Laverne? Yes. She recovered quickly, all professional polish. Mr. Chen is expecting you. Conference room C, 43rd floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending to judgment. When the doors opened, I was greeted by a woman in a sharp suit. Mrs. Laverne. This way, please. She led me down a hallway lined with expensive art, the kind Dmitri used to collect, and into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Richard Chen stood when I entered. 60-something, silver-haired, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But he wasn't alone. Octavia sat at the far end of the table, perfectly coiffed, wearing pearls and an expression of barely restrained fury. Jonah West sat beside her, his smile practiced and empty. My stomach turned to ice. Mrs. Laverne, Richard said warmly. Thank you for coming. Please sit. I remained standing. I was told this was about documents. I didn't realize it would be a family meeting. We're all stakeholders in Dmitri's estate, Jonah said smoothly. It made sense to convene together. Stakeholders. I looked at him. Is that what you call family now? Octavia's eyes flashed. If you'd bothered to return any of our calls, perhaps we could have handled this privately, Mirabelle. The way she said my name, like it tasted bitter. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should begin. Mrs. Laverne, if you'll sit. Just tell me what you need me to sign, I said. Richard exchanged a glance with his associate. It's not quite that simple. Your husband's will was complex, and there are certain parties who believe there may have been undue influence. My blood went cold. Excuse me? What Mr. Chen is trying to say delicately, Octavia interrupted, is that Dmitri was not in his right mind when he made certain decisions regarding his estate. He had a heart condition, I said slowly. Not dementia. He was medicated, Jonah added. Heavily. In pain. Vulnerable to manipulation. The implication hung in the air like poison. You think I manipulated him? My voice was dangerously quiet. We think, Octavia said, leaning forward, that a 29-year-old nurse who married a dying billionaire might have had ulterior motives. The room spun. I was 32 when we met, and he wasn't dying. He had years. But you knew about the condition, Jonah pressed. You knew he was vulnerable. And 3 years later, conveniently, he's gone, and you're the primary beneficiary of a fortune that should have stayed in the family. I am family, I said, my voice breaking. I was his wife. For 3 years, Octavia hissed. 3 years, Mirabelle. I am his sister. I knew him for 40 years. And you think you deserve. He chose me. The words exploded out of me. He chose to leave me everything because he knew exactly what you were. He knew you'd do this. He told me you would. Silence. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Laverne, is that what this meeting is? You're contesting the will. We're exploring our options, Jonah said carefully. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Explore away. You'll lose. Will we? Octavia stood, her chair scraping back. We have documentation of his medications, testimony from doctors about his mental state, and we have a very clear timeline of a young woman who isolated him from his family, who convinced him to restructure his entire estate. I never asked him for a single thing. My hands were shaking. I didn't even know about most of it until after he died. Convenient, she sneered. You know what? I'm done. I turned toward the door. If you walk out of this meeting, Jonah called, we file the contest tomorrow. This will get ugly, Mirabelle. Expensive.
Public.
Is that really what you want? I stopped, hand on the door. Or, he continued, voice softening into something oily, we can settle this reasonably. You sign over Dmitri's shares in Laverne Industries. Keep the house, keep a reasonable amount for your future. Everyone walks away with something. I turned back slowly. A reasonable amount. 10 million, Octavia said. More than generous for 3 years of marriage. 10 million. Out of 500. And they thought they were being generous. I looked at Richard Chen. Is this legal? What they're doing? He looked uncomfortable. Contesting a will is within their rights if they believe there's grounds. Whether they'd win is uncertain. These cases can take years. Years of this. Years of lawyers and depositions, and having my love for Dmitri picked apart in court. Years of people like Octavia telling the world I was a gold digger who manipulated a dying man. I felt something break inside me. Not my resolve. My hope. Hope that Dmitri's death would eventually hurt less. Hope that I could build something new. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be happy again. I need time, I whispered. You have 48 hours, Octavia said coldly. After that, we file. I don't remember leaving the building. Don't remember the elevator ride down, or walking out onto the street into gray afternoon light. I just remember sitting on a bench 3 blocks away, staring at nothing, feeling like I was drowning. My phone buzzed. Callum, hey. Lucy wants to know if you're coming to dinner tomorrow. We're making spaghetti. Well, attempting to make spaghetti. No pressure either way. Another buzz. Lucy apparently stole the phone. Please come, Mira, we miss you. Followed by approximately 15 heart emojis. Something in my chest cracked completely open. Because I realized, sitting on that bench, what I had to do. I couldn't drag Callum and Lucy into this. Couldn't let them be collateral damage in a legal war with people who had unlimited resources and no conscience. They deserved better. They deserved someone uncomplicated. Someone without 500 million reasons for people to question their motives. Someone who wouldn't bring tabloids and lawyers and scandal into their quiet, healing life. I typed out a response with shaking hands. I'm sorry. Something came up. I don't think I can make it. I stared at the words, then deleted them and wrote, I'm sorry. I don't think this is a good idea anymore. Send it before I could change my mind. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Did I do something wrong? Tears blurred my vision.
No.
You did everything right. That's the problem. I turned off my phone and sat there on that bench as the city moved around me, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Because I'd failed Dmitri's test after all. Not because I couldn't identify the vultures, but because I'd let myself care about someone, and now I had to walk away to protect him. I didn't go back to Havermill Cove. Instead, I checked into a hotel near the airport, one of those sterile corporate places where everything is beige and nothing has personality. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for 3 hours. My phone stayed off. I couldn't face Callum's messages. Couldn't face the hurt I'd caused. Couldn't face Pearl asking where I'd disappeared to, or Lucy's innocent confusion about why I'd suddenly vanished. It was better this way, I told myself.
Cleaner.
They'd move on. Callum would find someone uncomplicated, someone who didn't come with a target on her back. Lucy would forget about me eventually. Kids were resilient. I was doing the right thing. So, why did it feel like dying? On the second day, there was a knock at my door. I ignored it. Another knock. More insistent. Mira, I know you're in there. The front desk confirmed it. Pearl's voice. My heart stopped. I'm not leaving until you open this door, honey. And I've got all day. I sat frozen for a long moment, then finally dragged myself to the door and opened it. Pearl stood there in her diner uniform, arms crossed, looking at me with those seeing too much eyes. You look like hell, she said. How did you? Callum's a mess. Lucy's heartbroken. And you disappeared without a word. She pushed past me into the room. So, I called in a favor with a friend who works at the phone company, tracked your last known location, and here I am. Now sit down and tell me what happened. Pearl.
Sit. Down.
I sat. Pearl pulled up the desk chair, turned it around, and sat facing me. Talk.
So I did.
I told her everything. About Dmitri. About the inheritance. About Octavia and Jonah and the lawyers, and the ultimatum. About how I couldn't drag Callum and Lucy into a legal nightmare that could destroy their quiet life. When I finished, Pearl was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You're an idiot. I blinked. What? You heard me. You're being an idiot. She leaned forward. You think you're protecting them by running away. You think you're being noble. But what you're really doing is making a choice for them instead of with them. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're scared. You've been hurt. And now that you've found something good, something real, you're sabotaging it because you don't think you deserve it. The words hit like a slap. That's not. Isn't it? Pearl's voice softened. Mira, I've watched you for 2 months. I've seen you punishing yourself for surviving, for feeling things, for wanting to be happy again. And now you've got people who care about you, who see you, and you're running because that's scarier than being alone. My eyes burned. They deserve better. They deserve the truth. They deserve a choice. She reached over and gripped my hand. You know what Callum said when he came into the diner yesterday? I shook my head. He said, Did I push too hard? Did I read this wrong? Because I thought she felt the same way I did. Pearl's grip tightened. That man is falling for you, Mira. And Lucy already loves you. And you're sitting in a hotel room deciding for them that they can't handle your baggage. It's not just baggage, I whispered. It's a war. Octavia will destroy anyone close to me. She'll drag them through. Let her try. Pearl's voice turned to steel. You think Callum Reed can't handle some entitled rich woman? You think that man who rebuilt his entire life after losing his wife can't weather a storm? You're underestimating him. And worse, you're underestimating yourself. I pulled my hand away, wrapping my arms around myself. What if I lose? What if they contest the will, and it all falls apart, and I drag him into it for nothing? What if you win? Pearl countered. What if you fight back and claim what's yours, and build a life with people who actually love you? What if you stop letting fear make your decisions? I couldn't answer, because she was right. I was terrified. Not of losing the money, of losing them, of caring about Callum and Lucy, and then having to watch everything fall apart. Here's what I know, Pearl said quietly. Love is always a risk. Always. There's no guarantee. No safety net. You can protect yourself by staying alone, or you can be brave enough to let people in. But you don't get both. I've already lost so much, I whispered. I know, honey. I know. She stood, moving to sit beside me on the bed. But Dmitri didn't leave you that money so you could hide from life. He left it so you could see who was real. And you found someone real, Mira. Don't throw that away, because you're scared. After Pearl left, I sat alone with her words. With the choice in front of me, I could sign Octavia's papers, take the 10 million, walk away from Havermill Cove, and never look back. Build a safe, small life where no one could hurt me because no one would get close enough.
Or
I could fight. I could honor Dmitri's wish, not just the letter, but the spirit of it. He hadn't wanted me to run. He'd wanted me to stand. I picked up my phone with shaking hands.
turn it on.
Immediately, messages flooded in. Callum, Mira, please just tell me if I misread this. I can handle rejection. I can't handle silence. Lucy, clearly having stolen the phone again, did I do something wrong? Daddy says you're busy, but I miss you. Renata, my old friend, heard through the grapevine you're in town. Drinks? We need to catch up. And one from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Laverne, this is Richard Chin. If you're planning to contest Ms. Laverne's challenge, I'd like to discuss representation. Your husband was a friend. I believe he'd want someone fighting for his wishes.
Call me.
I stared at that last message for a long time. Then I made my choice. I called Richard Chin first. Mr. Chin, it's Mirabelle Laverne. Mrs. Laverne. I was hoping you'd call. I'm not signing anything. And I'm not settling. If Octavia wants a fight, she'll get one. A pause. Then, good. Your husband would be proud. When can you come in? Tomorrow. I have something I need to do first. Understood. I'll have my team start building the case. Mrs. Laverne, we're going to win this. I know. I hung up. Then, heart hammering, I pulled up Callum's number. Stared at it. This was it. The moment where I chose to be brave, or chose to be safe. I thought about Dmitri, about the way he'd loved me, fully, without reservation, knowing our time was limited. I thought about Lucy's arms around my waist and Callum's steady eyes and the way they'd made me feel human again. And I thought about what Pearl said. You don't get love and safety. You have to choose. I chose love. I pressed call. It rang once.
Twice.
Mira? Callum's voice was rough, uncertain. I'm sorry, I said, the words tumbling out. I'm so sorry. I panicked and I ran, and I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself, and Where are you? The city. But Callum, I need to tell you something. About why I'm here, and what's happening, and it's complicated and messy, and… Mira. His voice was gentle. Breathe. I breathed. Now tell me where you are. Exactly. I gave him the hotel address. Okay, he said. I'm 3 hours away. Don't move. Don't make any decisions. Just wait for me.
Can you do that?
Tears streamed down my face. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Because whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to deal with it alone. Not anymore. Callum. 3 hours, Mira. I'm already getting my keys. The line went dead, and I sat there on that hotel bed, crying and laughing at the same time. Because for the first time since Dmitri died, I wasn't alone. I'd let someone in, and he was coming. Callum arrived in 2 hours and 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time, pacing the hotel room, rehearsing what I'd say. how I'd explain everything without sounding like I'd been lying to him all along. When the knock came, I froze. Then I opened the door. He stood there in jeans and a flannel shirt, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it, eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Hi," I whispered. "Hi." For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he stepped inside, closed the door, and pulled me into his arms. I broke. Completely, utterly broke. All the fear and grief and loneliness I'd been carrying poured out in great, heaving sobs against his chest. And Callum just held me, one hand in my hair, the other wrapped around my back, anchoring me to something solid. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." When I finally quieted, he guided me to sit on the bed, pulling the desk chair over so he could sit facing me, knees almost touching mine. "Talk to me," he said gently. "Tell me what happened."
So I did.
I told him everything I hadn't said before. About the lawyers' meeting. About Octavia and Jonah's accusations. About the ultimatum and the will contest, and the choice between fighting for what was mine or walking away with a fraction of it just to make the nightmare end. I told him I'd pushed him away because I was terrified of dragging him and Lucy into a mess that could get ugly, public, and cruel. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Do you think I'm weak?" I blinked, startled.
What? No.
"Of course not. Do you think I can't handle difficult situations? That I'd fall apart if things got complicated?" "Callum. Because I buried my wife when I was 34, Mira. I raised a 2-year-old alone through grief, so deep I wasn't sure I'd survive it. I've dealt with lawyers and insurance companies and well-meaning people who thought they knew what was best for me and my daughter." He leaned forward. "I'm not fragile. And I'm not going to break because your late husband's family are greedy assholes." Despite everything, I almost laughed. "I know you're not fragile," I said quietly. "I was trying to protect you." "From what? Money? Lawyers? Drama?" He shook his head. "Mira, I don't care about any of that. What I care about is you making decisions about us without talking to me. That's not protection. That's running." The truth of it hit hard. "You're right," I whispered. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't do it again." His voice softened. "If we're going to do this, whatever this is between us, we do it together. That means the messy stuff too. Understand?" I nodded, throat tight. He reached over and took my hand.
Now.
"What do you want to do? Not what you think you should do. Not what protects everyone else. What do you want?" I looked at our hands, his calloused and strong, mine smaller and trembling slightly. "I want to fight," I said. "I want to honor what Dmitri wanted. I want to prove that I loved him, that our marriage was real, that I deserve what he left me." I met Callum's eyes. "But I'm scared. Of losing. Of winning. Of having all that money and all that responsibility and not knowing who I am anymore." I swallowed hard. "Of people always wondering if you're with me for the money." Callum's expression turned fierce. "Anyone who knows me knows better. And anyone who doesn't, I don't give a damn what they think. It won't be easy, Mira."
He squeezed my hand.
"I'm a widowed single father who makes furniture in a coastal town barely on the map. Easy left my life 4 years ago. I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for real. And you think this is real? I think you're the first person since Anna who's made me want to try. I think Lucy talks about you constantly. I think when you disappeared, it felt like losing something I didn't even know I'd found."
He paused. "Yeah."
"I think it's real." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I'm falling for you," I whispered. "And it terrifies me." "Good." He smiled slightly. "I'm terrified too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." The next morning, I walked into Richard Chen's office with Callum beside me. Octavia's face when she saw us was priceless. "You brought your..." She looked Callum up and down with barely concealed disdain. Friend to a legal meeting? I brought my support, I said calmly, taking a seat. Callum sat beside me, his presence steady and grounding. Richard smiled approvingly. Shall we begin? What followed was 3 hours of the most satisfying meeting of my life. Richard had done his homework. He presented documentation of every gift Dmitri and I had given together, every charity we'd supported, every decision we'd made as partners. He had medical records proving Dmitri's mental competency right up until his death. He had testimony from Dmitri's personal physician stating the medications had no cognitive effects. And then he played his trump card. Your husband anticipated this, Richard said to me gently, sliding a tablet across the table. He recorded this video a month before he died. I pressed play with shaking hands. Dmitri's face filled the screen. Thinner than I remembered, but smiling.
Alive.
Mira, my love. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And it probably means my family is making your life hell. I'm sorry for that. My vision blurred. I want to be very clear for the record and for anyone who questions this. I, Dmitri Laverne, being of completely sound mind and body, well, my heart's a bit dodgy, but my mind is sharp, he smiled. Leave everything to my wife, Mirabelle Sokol-Laverne, because she is the only person who ever loved me for who I was, not what I had. She made my last years the happiest of my life. And if my sister or anyone else tries to take that from her, they can go to hell. He leaned closer to the camera. Fight for this, Mira. Fight for yourself. You deserve everything and more. And when you find someone who loves you the way you deserve, and you will, don't let guilt or fear stop you. I want you to be happy. That's all I ever wanted. The video ended. The room was silent. I looked at Octavia. Her face was pale, jaw tight. You have 24 hours to withdraw your contest, Richard said calmly. Or we release this to the media along with documentation of your attempts to manipulate a grieving widow. Your choice. Jonah and Octavia exchanged glances. Then Octavia stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out without a word. Jonah followed. It was over. 3 months later. I stood in the doorway of Callum's workshop, watching him sand an antique rocking chair with the kind of focused attention he brought to everything he did. He looked up, saw me, and smiled, the real smile, the one that crinkled his eyes.
Hey.
Thought you had a meeting with the foundation board? Finished early. I walked in, wrapping my arms around him from behind. They approved funding for the literacy program. 20 schools next year. That's amazing. He set down the sandpaper, turning to face me. Dmitri would be proud. Yeah, I said softly. I think he would. I'd kept my promise. I'd fought. I'd won. And I'd used Dmitri's gift the way he'd intended, to do good, to help people, to build something meaningful. But I'd also given myself permission to live, to love again, to let Callum into my mess, and to step into his. Lucy wants to know if you're staying for dinner, Callum said, pulling me closer. What are we making? She's insisting on pancakes. For dinner. Because rules are made up. I laughed. She's not wrong. No, he agreed, kissing my forehead. She's really not. We stood there for a moment, sawdust and sunlight, and the smell of old wood surrounding us. Callum? I said. Yeah. Thank you. For not running when things got hard. Thank you for not staying gone when you did. He tipped my chin up, his eyes serious. We're in this together, Mira. The good, the bad, all of it. Okay. Okay. He kissed me, soft and sure and full of promise. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt it. Home. Not in a place or a bank account or a legacy. In this moment. With this man. With his daughter, who'd taken to calling me Miramom when she thought I couldn't hear. Dmitri had given me a gift. Not just money. The gift of seeing who is real. And Callum Reed was the realest thing in my life. So here's what I learned. Sometimes the right person finds you when you're still healing. Sometimes love doesn't wait for you to be ready. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't what someone leaves you, it's the courage they give you to rebuild. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and letting someone in? Tell me your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you're struggling with that choice right now, choose love. Choose the risk. It's worth it. That evening, sitting around Callum's kitchen table eating pancakes for dinner while Lucy told elaborate stories about her day, my phone buzzed. A text from Pearl. Heard you won. Proud of you, honey. Also, you're working Saturday. Don't think getting rich means you can quit on me. I laughed, showing Callum the message. She's never letting you leave Havermill Cove, you know, he said. Good, I said, watching Lucy draw hearts on her pancake with syrup. I'm not planning to, because this right here was worth more than $500 million. This was worth everything.